Okay, today we are on part 2 of World War I. We're going to be talking about the United States and our relationship with the European countries during the war. Now, in 1912, President Woodrow Wilson had been elected president, and then the war broke out in 1914. In America, it was very different in World War I than World War II. There were many Germans who lived in America. And there were two valid points each side in the war. In World War I, the Allies, as well as the Central Powers, had valid points to why they felt like they should be victorious. Unlike World War II, when there was obviously just one right side, or most people feel is obviously one side. So the United States and the government tried very hard to keep the United States neutral, which means that we won't get involved in the war. So here's a quote by President Wilson. "The effect of war upon the United States will depend upon what American citizens say and do. Every man who really loves America will act and speak in the true spirit of neutrality, which is the spirit of impartiality and fairness and friendliness to all concerned. The United States must be neutral in fact as well as in name during these days that are to try men's souls." President Woodrow Wilson, August 19th, 1914. This is right in the middle of his first administration, and he was trying very hard to stay neutral and to keep the United States out of the war, which was across the ocean. And we had never, up until this time, had any wars which involved European countries, except for Great Britain when we had the Revolutionary War. Okay, when the war began, President Wilson followed the traditional American policy of neutrality by not taking sides. His campaign slogan, when he ran for re-election in 1916, his campaign slogan was, "Wilson kept us out of war." And you saw a lot of promotional propaganda signs, keep us, be neutral, stay out of the war. Right? And then here's one that says, "I'm neutral, but not afraid of any of them." And you see the different little dogs representing each of the countries. And the United States there is the bull terrier, and they say, we're not afraid, but we're going to stay neutral. All right? The reasons that we finally got involved in the war is because we had closer ties with Britain and France. Our traditions, our language, our political system was based more on the English and the French systems than on the German side. And the Germans' actions then, when Germany began to become very aggressive and when they invaded Belgium, and they had German propaganda that was very anti-American and anti-ally, and so America began leaning more and more toward the Allies in the war. Right? And then the U.S. intervened because one of the reasons was the Zimmermann telegram. This was a telegram that was intercepted from Germany, sent to Mexico, and Germany offered to help Mexico regain the territories of New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas if they joined the war on the German side. So this letter came, and it was intercepted, and it said, "Hey, Mexico, if you'll help us fight America," which they felt like would keep America fighting Mexico and not get involved, "then we'll come over and help you regain the territory that you lost to the United States." That's the Zimmermann telegram. That's a very important term. You need to know that. Okay? All right? And then here's the main reason that we were involved in the war, the sinking of the Lusitania. All right, a German U-boat sunk a ship that killed 128 Americans. The Lusitania was a British ship, but there were 128 Americans on it. Germany had previously agreed that they would stop attacking private vessels or unarmed vessels, non-military vessels. But in 1917, they returned to their former policy of sinking anything that was in their waters, and they sank the Lusitania, which ended up causing us to get involved in the war. The Sussex Pledge was Germany's attempt. They had formally said they pledged that they would not sink any boats that were neutral or any non-military vessels. But they resumed this is a very important term, they resumed their use of unrestricted submarine warfare. Unrestricted means no rules, or it's free, whoever, it's free game. They resumed their system of unrestricted submarine warfare. When that happened, the United States declared war. No sooner had President Wilson been, he was reelected on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." Very shortly after he was reelected and inaugurated, he had to go to Congress and ask for a declaration of war. All right? So on the home front, this allowed the national government to draft men into the service of war. This is the first time since the Civil War that we have had a draft, and this now, at this time, it becomes a law. And so there are a lot of posters supporting your country and defend your country, enlist now, and a lot of patriotic things. Authorized, and the government was now authorized to enforce a draft where men would be required to serve in the military, whether they volunteered or not. On the home front, President Wilson was given sweeping powers by Congress to regulate the government and the economy during the war. During war, presidents are given a lot more power, and they can make rules about the economy and make laws, make regulation that normally they would not be allowed to. So the government controlled public agencies to prepare for war. Citizens lost civil liberties. The Espionage Act and the Sedition Act, you could not speak out against war. Normally, we would say that's freedom of speech, but during times of war, in this era especially, if you were heard speaking out against the country or saying that you disagreed with us being in the war, or certainly if you agreed with the German side, you could be charged with a crime. Okay, but the U.S. economy benefited greatly from exports sent to Europe. Okay, we were put on, there was rationing. Rationing means you're only given a limited amount. So like a family might just be limited to 2 pounds of sugar a month. They established wheatless kitchens, so to try to save your the wheat and flour, and make sure that our soldiers in Europe have food to eat. All right, and then the U.S. exports to Central and Allied powers. You can see here our exports went just zoomed straight up from 1914 to 1916. So it greatly helped the economy. I'm so sorry for my poor filming here. I'm trying to go through these notes as if everyone were sitting in the classroom, and it's a little bit difficult. All right, here's a very important court case. It's called Schenck versus the United States. It actually went to court after the war was over. In 1919 was when it was decided. But Charles Schenck, he passed out literature, and he urged people to resist the draft. He told young men, if you're drafted, don't go, which was a federal crime, by the way. He was convicted of sedition, but he said his First Amendment rights were violated. He said, I have the freedom of speech. But the Supreme Court sided with the government in this case, and they said that free speech is not protected if it presents clear and present danger. So in other words, they said if his speech led to young men not volunteering or not joining the draft, and then we didn't have enough soldiers to defend us, this could cause us to lose our country. His speech is dangerous. And so this decision became a guide for measuring the limits of free speech all the way up until Vietnam. All right. The American Expeditionary Forces. U.S. troops, remember we talked in yesterday's notes, we talked about how there was a stalemate in Europe. Neither side was advancing. Every side was in the trenches, and they weren't making any headway until the Americans came in, and the U.S. troops were sent to Europe in 1918. They very quickly came in and they defeated Germany. John Pershing, he commanded the American Expeditionary Forces. John Pershing, very important soldier in World War I. Okay. The Battle of Argonne Forest. It was the final major battle of World War I. The new U.S. forces helped break German lines and push them back. Germany was defeated and surrendered on November 11th, 1918. Okay, and so we finally won the war. All right, Alvin York. He's one of my favorite people in history. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for Valor. Alvin York had been a Quaker which is a form of religion that does not believe in violence. They don't believe in fighting, but he was drafted. And so at first he said, can you please put me in a position where I won't have to take up arms against another person because it's against my religion? So they gave him kitchen duty. And so he peeled potatoes and worked and scrubbed pots and pans in the kitchen out on the battlefield or wherever he was stationed in Europe for about 6 months. And finally he said, this stinks. Somebody hand me a rifle. And he then went to war, and he fought bravely and valiantly, and he ended up leading 7 men. Most of his battalion were killed, but he led 7 men into a machine gun nest, and he, together with his 7 men, they killed 28 Germans, and they captured 128 men and several guns and took them prisoner. And so he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for valor. All right. And so that will be, we will be doing a timeline, but we're not going to worry about it at this point. So that, I believe, let me check to be sure, but I believe that is, yes, your notes. That will complete our notes for this section. We have one more section to go after this.